My name is Tabitha Cohen, and I'm 34 years old. If you had told me a year ago that my life would shrink into spreadsheets, legal documents, and sleepless nights rereading the same email chain over and over, I would have laughed. I used to think divorce was a clean break. Painful, yes, but straightforward. You sign papers, divide things, walk away. But that was before I separated from my ex-husband. 3 months into the separation, I learned a brutal truth. When someone doesn't want closure, they will drag the ending as long as they can, even if it means tearing you apart piece by piece. And he was good at that. I spent those 3 months doing everything I could to finalize things peacefully. Every day, I sent him updated proposals. Every day, he found new ways to derail them. The law in our state was no fault, gender neutral, and surprisingly fair. I knew I would be paying some alimony. I knew he was legally entitled to a reasonable share. I wasn't trying to cheat him. I just wanted it done. But he wouldn't accept anything unless it placed every advantage in his hands and every responsibility on mine. He'd skim through my emails and reply with slippery half-sentences like, "Yeah, but what about my stability? You're not understanding my needs. We'll revisit this later." Later never came, only more excuses. I tried to stay civil, but around week 7, something inside me shifted. A quiet click, a whisper of self-preservation. He wasn't negotiating, he was stalling, stringing me along, keeping me in limbo. Like if he refused long enough, I'd crack and take him back. Return to being the quiet, accommodating wife who said yes to everything. But that woman was gone. So I switched to email only, creating a paper trail. I moved my direct deposit into a solo account. I stopped allowing him unfettered access to my money, though I continued covering his weekly cash flow, bills, groceries, because I knew the court would require support anyway. I was still being more generous than he deserved. And then I made my final offer. Extremely unfair to me, painfully generous to him. 1 car for him, 1 for me. I take all the joint debt, even his student loans. I pay him $3,000, $4,000 a month for a full year so he can get on his feet. Plus all of our furniture, appliances, and shared belongings. I'd walk away with nothing but my dog, my car, and a few boxes of clothes. I remember staring at that email before sending it, feeling my chest tighten. It was the kind of offer no reasonable person would reject. He rejected it in 10 minutes. No explanation, no counteroffer. Just, not good enough. That was the moment I pushed the final boundary. "We need a mediator," I told him. "We're wasting time." After 2 full weeks of evasion, he finally agreed. And 3 days later, I found myself walking into a quiet office with blue walls, a long polished table, and a manila folder filled with every proposal I'd sent since the separation. My ex-husband arrived late, of course. He walked in wearing the same self-satisfied grin he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand, like he was about to charm his way out of taking responsibility for anything. The mediator began with the rules. Structure, fairness, 1 person speaks at a time, no outside filings during mediation unless both parties agree. I signed without hesitation. He hesitated, mumbled something, then finally signed. The session started and immediately fell apart. Every question the mediator asked, simple questions like, "What assets do you feel strongly about keeping?" sent my ex spiraling into emotional tirades. He spoke directly at me, not the mediator. Accusing, pleading, reminiscing, guilt-tripping. I kept my eyes on the mediator. That made him furious. At one point, in a moment that still replays in my mind, he actually climbed onto the mediation table, crawling toward me so he could shove his face near mine and force eye contact. The mediator slammed his binder shut. "That's enough. We're stopping here," he said sharply. My ex froze halfway across the table, looking ridiculous, but still angry, still convinced he was the victim. The mediator gave us homework, forms to fill out before the next session, and scheduled the follow-up meeting 2 weeks later. I left the building exhausted but hopeful. Finally, progress. Or so I thought. 3 days later, a knock came at my door. A man in a navy vest asked, "Are you Tabitha Cohen?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." He handed me a thick envelope. "Consider yourself served." I opened it on my kitchen counter, and my hands began to shake. A court summons, a spousal support complaint, filed by my ex-husband. He claimed I had given him only $1,130 in the entire 3 months of separation. That was a lie so enormous it left my vision blurry. And worse, filing it was a direct violation of the mediator's rules he had signed. I stood in my kitchen staring at the papers, the dishwasher humming, my dog watching me quietly. There was a stillness in the air, the kind that happens right before a storm breaks. He wanted war, but he didn't know that I kept every receipt, every transfer, every bank statement. He didn't know that the moment he tried to weaponize the system, he also gave me permission to stop protecting him. He had no idea what he'd just started. When I calmed down enough to think, the anger sharpened into clarity. He wanted to drag me into court? Fine. I would walk in prepared, not emotional, not flustered, just armed with facts. For the next 2 nights, my dining table became a war room. I printed 3 months of bank statements, highlighted every transfer to his account, gathered every receipt for bills I paid on his behalf, and stacked the evidence into neat piles. When I laid it all out, it formed a wall of paper more than 4 inches thick. The real number wasn't $1,130. It was $13,000 and change. And that didn't even include the over 100 express lane toll violations he'd racked up using my car, each one snapped by a traffic camera, each one mailed directly to me. I created a spreadsheet summarizing everything, crisp, clean, and devastatingly organized. Then I reviewed the spousal support formula again, calculating what I'd actually owe if it came down to court-ordered payments. 40% of the income difference. He wasn't going to like the math, but I did. The morning of the court hearing, I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the hallway outside family law. The walls were beige, the air too cold, and the hum of fluorescent lights felt louder than usual. He arrived 5 minutes later and plopped down right beside me, even though the bench was empty. He didn't say hello. He launched straight into a monologue. "You're ruining my life, Tabitha. You never cared about my stability. I should have known you'd try to punish me." I took out a pen and quietly began writing on the back of my folder, documenting every word. He didn't notice at first. When he finally did, he stiffened. "Oh, I see. Writing things down so your friends can hate me? That's what this is?" I didn't look at him. My friends don't need encouragement. He moved 3 seats away and sulked in silence. The court officer appeared and called our names. Showtime. Inside the small courtroom, the officer went through the usual procedural statements. My ex-husband folded his arms, already looking self-righteous, already building momentum for the dramatic performance he no doubt rehearsed in the mirror. "Do you have anything to add to your complaint?" the officer asked him. He stood, and then he performed. A full 5-minute speech where he painted himself as the abandoned victim, accused me of cruelty, of trying to replace him with a lifestyle that didn't include responsibilities, and insisted that I clearly didn't need any of my income because, and I quote, "she chooses to live cheaply anyway." I stared at the back of his head, wondering if he believed the things he said, or if he was just addicted to the sound of his own excuses. When he finally finished, the officer turned to me. "Ms. Cohen, do you have anything you'd like to add?" I rose and placed my thick stack of documents on the desk. The officer's eyebrows shot up. "This," I said calmly, "is a full record of every cent I provided during the past 3 months." On top was the neat summary spreadsheet. As the officer skimmed it, I walked her through the highlights. Direct transfers, bill payments, grocery orders, insurance coverage, the toll violations, the weekly cash flow payments I sent him. At each line item, my ex jumped in to interrupt. "That doesn't count. That was a gift. She's twisting things. I didn't ask her to pay that." The officer raised her hand each time. "Sir, stop interrupting." He didn't. She repeated herself firmer. "Sir, one more interruption and I will end your ability to speak today." He huffed loudly and sank back in his chair, muttering under his breath. We finished reviewing the evidence. The officer closed the folder and looked at him, then at me. "Mr. and Ms. Cohen, this process exists to ensure fairness. Based on this documentation, the financial support will now be handled through garnishment in accordance with state guidelines." My ex's face relaxed into a smug smile. He thought he won. He thought garnishment meant bigger checks for him. He had no idea what he'd actually done. The officer punched the numbers into her calculator. I watched his posture shift, slowly, as she recited the results. The official amount was far less than what I had voluntarily been giving him. In fact, he had just cost himself more than half his previous cash flow. She printed the order, handed me my copy, and said, "You're free to go. His paperwork may take a few more minutes." That was the closest thing to mercy she could legally offer. I nodded, took the hint, and left. The moment I reached the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and called my cell carrier. "I need to remove an authorized user from my account." "Does he want to set up his own plan?" the representative asked. "I can't speak for him. All I can tell you is that a court order allows me to remove him." Within 2 minutes, his line went dark. Then I handled the rest. Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Spotify, DoorDash, car insurance, gym membership. cloud storage. The streaming service he swore he didn't use but absolutely did. Everything I had paid for. One by one, I closed the accounts or changed the passwords. By the time I drove home, my phone was exploding with emails from him, then his sister, then numbers I didn't recognize, borrowed phones. I didn't respond to any of them. I waited and waited. Exactly 3 hours later, the silence broke with a single screenshot. An all-caps message. Even Netflix? Really, Tabitha? Even Netflix? I laughed. For the first time in 3 months, it wasn't bitter. It was clean, sharp, liberating. Because the truth had landed where it belonged. He wasn't losing support. He was losing control. For a few weeks, life went strangely quiet. No more dramatic emails, no more 3 a.m. guilt paragraphs, no more you owe me tantrums disguised as rational conversation. The quiet felt suspicious at first, like the moment before an earthquake. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach prepared for another explosion. But he didn't erupt. He plotted. A full month after the courtroom garnishment order, he filed an appeal. Not because he had grounds, not because there was any discrepancy, but because, in his mind, losing meant the system was broken, never him. The appeal was denied in less than a week. Insufficient reasoning. No surprise. But he wasn't done manufacturing conflict. The next ambush. 2 weeks after that, I received yet another legal notice. He filed a complaint accusing me of failing to pay his car loan, which, according to him, meant I was creating intentional hardship. It was a laughable accusation. Not only was I paying it, I had the monthly statements to prove it. He simply didn't know how to log into his own account, or never cared enough to learn. This time, I hired an attorney. Not because I needed one to win, but because I wanted someone sitting next to me who could look unimpressed, while my ex-husband unraveled himself again. The day of the hearing, my attorney and I logged into the virtual courtroom. My ex joined by phone, no camera, just a voice descending from a digital cloud of chaos. Before the call connected, the court officer glanced at my attorney and said with a sigh, "This lady is a piece of work." It was the moment of validation I didn't know I needed. For months, I'd tried convincing myself that maybe I was being too harsh, too sensitive, imagining things. No. Everyone who dealt with him professionally saw the reality instantly. The meltdown. The call began with procedural statements. The officer then asked him to present evidence supporting his claim. He didn't have any. So instead, he launched into another emotional monologue, louder this time, more frantic, as if the volume of his suffering would override the facts. "She's trying to make my life impossible. She thinks she can control everything. She's sabotaging me." My attorney raised a hand politely, waiting for the officer's cue. The officer tried to intervene. "Sir, please stick to the matter of the car payments." He didn't. He spiraled deeper. "I know she's not paying. I feel it. I can feel she's doing it just to hurt me." I watched my attorney slowly close her binder and sit back, expression neutral. That's how you know a lawyer is relaxed, when they don't even need their notes to win. Finally, the officer cut him off. "Sir, I am holding proof that she has paid the car loan every single month. Your claim is factually incorrect." There was a stunned silence on the phone line. Then a small, almost comedic sound. A strangled breath, halfway between shock and indignation. My ex tried again. Well, she's hiding payments or manipulating the statements. She must be. She's vindictive." The officer's tone snapped cold. "Complaint dismissed. Thank you." And she hung up on him. Just like that. The call ended with the tone of finality I'd been craving for months. The emotional aftershock. That night, I washed dishes with the kitchen window open, listening to the breeze move through the trees. My dog slept on the rug, peaceful for the first time in ages. The house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath, while I tiptoed through the fog of our collapsing marriage. Now it was over. Not legally. Paperwork still had its slow crawl through the system, but emotionally, psychically, spiritually, it was done. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Relief. Not triumph, not vengeance. Just quiet, steady, earned relief. He had spent months trying to weaponize the legal system, twisting rules and fabricating harm to claw at any advantage he could find. But the truth had a habit of surfacing, the kind of truth that didn't care about performance or manipulation. It was simple math, simple evidence, simple accountability, and it crushed him. The final realization. Here's the thing most people don't understand about situations like mine. Sometimes the person who swears they just want fairness is the same person who breaks every rule to avoid it. Sometimes the one who screams victim the loudest is the one who expected you to stay small, quiet, and obedient. Sometimes the one who accuses you of cruelty is the same one who forced you to develop boundaries in the first place. My ex thought I would crumble, that I'd fall apart without his approval, that I'd retreat the moment he raised his voice. But the divorce didn't break me. It rebuilt me, piece by piece, email by email, bank statement by bank statement, court hearing by court hearing. And by the time the dust finally settled, I wasn't afraid of his anger anymore, or his lies, or his family, or the noise he tried to fill my life with. I was free. When I finally shut off the kitchen light that night, the house was dark and